Welcome to Enchanted Astrology with Ariel Smith. Thank you for joining me as we look at the astrological energies for the week of May 20th until the 26th. Now, this week, we have the Sun entering into the sign of Gemini as we officially enter into Gemini season. And we also have a Mars square Pluto transit occurring. Now, I am just going to cover these aspects this week as they are the main ones, and I would like to spend a bit of time on the Pluto-Mars square. So first, to start off the week, on May 20th at 6:36 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, we have the Sun entering into the sign of Gemini, which marks the beginning of Gemini season on the astrological wheel. Now, Gemini season is where we start to see more movement in the air. Butterflies are drifting through the gardens. Bees and other pollinators are buzzing around from blossom to blossom. And flowers are blooming as nature becomes very busy, social, and in constant motion. So just like the pollinators exchanging pollen between flowers, Gemini energy is about exchange. Exchange of ideas, of conversations, information, and connection. So there is also typically increased social activity around Gemini season as we seek more conversation, mental stimulation, and there can even be a bit of restlessness. But overall, it is a lighter, more playful atmosphere. Now, Gemini season is something we notice, generally a little more subtly. You start to notice more life buzzing in the air. You feel lighter as the daylight is now becoming longer, temperatures are rising, at least in the northern hemisphere. You start to feel more alive and wanting to get out and socialize, to exchange information, and yourself buzz from one event to the next. But this year, we have the Sun entering into Gemini, where it immediately forms a conjunction to Uranus in Gemini, as Uranus is at 1 degree of Gemini, and they are both conjunct the Pleiades star system, which is located at 0 degrees of Gemini. Now, Uranus intensifies and creates sudden, immediate conditions. And Uranus here is going to amplify Gemini themes where they feel more intense, sudden, and noticeable. And with the conjunction happening in line with the Pleiades system, it's not just the normal Gemini themes we notice here. Uranus is also amplifying exchange in the realms of the unseen. And these are things like intuition, downloads, signals, heightened awareness, and the synchronicities that run in the background of life, orchestrating everything that we experience. So exchanges happen because of synchronicities, and we experience more synchronicities when we listen to our intuition. The Pleiades governs that subtle but powerful energy that is the ether, the ability to see into the unseen realms, what is normally hidden. Pleiades energy is very sensitive, gentle, and magical feeling. So this Gemini season feels a little different because of Gemini season starting off with a conjunction to both Uranus and the Pleiades. And if you have planets or points between 0 and 3 degrees of Gemini, this would be working with you more personally. As an example, every Gemini season, I look forward to spotting the pollinators, especially the bees. My husband and I make sure we have a very bee-friendly yard, and we get quite excited with the emergence of the bees and butterflies. So that's just a normal thing every Gemini season for us. But this Gemini season, we are just now purchasing an apiary, and we'll be keeping bees, thousands and thousands of them. So we have been downloading all kinds of beekeeping information over the past short while, making sure we understand how to care for them responsibly and correctly. We have been following beekeeping classes. We have a friend we can go to as a mentor. So this was all very sudden after years of a huge love for bees. And in a very Uranus and Gemini fashion, we will now be not just seeing a handful of bees this season. No, we will be caring for thousands of bees. So just to give you a funny example of how amplified your Gemini season experience can be, and especially if you have planets or points there, get ready to be surprised at how you will be working with Gemini energy in a very big way. Now, this week we also have Pluto at 5 degrees of Aquarius, receiving a square from Mars in Taurus, which starts on around May 21st, as he will be at 2 degrees of Taurus and in aspect. But the square will be exact on May 25th, when Mars reaches 5 degrees of Taurus. So the effect can be felt over the weekend, and strongest on Monday, May 25th. Now, Pluto-Mars squares have a strong reputation for intensity because they bring together two of the most forceful archetypes in astrology in a hard frictional aspect, which is that square. Mars represents our drive, how we assert ourselves, how we act. It can show up as anger or aggression, while Pluto represents power, control, transformation, and deep psychological intensity. And when these two meet in a square, their energies don't flow easily, so they collide and tend to amplify one another. So the lower frequency expression can show up as power struggles, anger, obsession, control issues, or emotional volatility. But the higher expressions can be a profound resilience. They can be hyper-focusing your willpower, courage, maybe under pressure, and the ability to transform through direct confrontation with challenges. So using the energy of the hard aspect to better transform yourself. Now, this hard aspect is happening in the fixed signs of Aquarius and Taurus. And the last time this happened, these two energies met in a square between Pluto and Mars. Pluto was in Taurus and Mars was in Aquarius. So the last time we saw Pluto-Mars square in the signs of Aquarius and Taurus, they were flipped. And Pluto was in Taurus, Mars was in Aquarius. Whereas this cycle, it's the opposite, obviously. Pluto is in Aquarius and will be receiving squares from Mars and Taurus. Or, excuse me. Yes, Mars and Taurus. Mars-Pluto squares repeat in a series, so it's not a one-time isolated event. it occurs in a series as both of the planets are moving through the zodiac, because Mars moves around and completes a cycle approximately every 2 years, and Pluto moves extremely slowly, spending about roughly 12 to 30 years, say, in a single sign. So the whole time Pluto is in Aquarius, Mars will be coming back around to Taurus every couple years to make this square. And depending on the retrograde cycle, it can make multiple passes during a square. So then when Mars enters into the sign of Scorpio, he will square Pluto again, as Scorpio is also 90 degrees away from Aquarius. Now we will do a later episode on the Aquarius Scorpio square closer to that event, but for this episode we are focusing on the Aquarius Taurus square that will play out until 2041. So we saw our very first square in this cycle happen back on June 11th of 2024. So that was a preview, and this week we are seeing the second square take place during this cycle. Now, the last cycle of Pluto-Mars square in the sign of Taurus and Aquarius was back between 1854 and 1883. Except back then, right, Pluto was in Taurus that time, and it received squares from Mars in Aquarius. Now, Pluto, being the stronger force, will ultimately overpower and absorb the Mars impulses. So back in the 19th century, we had Mars in Aquarius impulses of revolution, innovation, technology, powerfully strengthening old wealth structures like the state, banks, capitalism, and structures that are represented by that Pluto in Taurus. So those Mars impulses in Aquarius had attempted to disrupt these systems, but Pluto in Taurus was the stronger force, so it just transformed and intensified these systems instead. So the old systems absorbed these Mars and Aquarius impulses and used them to evolve and gain even more power, become even more stronger. So we have industrial technology that created giant industrial powers and corporations. Industrial movements often ended up strengthening the state, as was the case with Germany, Italy, and the US. Innovations like railroads, telegraphs, and factories increased state control and were used as tools to further centralize power and create even more capital. And with capitalism, right, wealth concentration increased very dramatically. And what we were left with was a highly centralized power structure. So the material systems did use that Aquarian innovation, but they used it to evolve and gain even more power, more control, and centralization. So with Pluto in Taurus back in the 19th century, the power was in the material and structural entities, and the Mars impulses were challenging and resisting that through disruption and revolution. But ultimately, the revolutionary drive and impulses from Mars were absorbed by that Taurus Pluto and used to just further increase its power. Now, during this cycle, it is flipped. This time, Pluto is in Aquarius, and it is the deeper, stronger evolutionary force. And Mars in Taurus is now acting as the resisting force. So in the 19th century, we saw these old material wealth systems gain power through revolutions. And this cycle, we can expect to see revolutionary systems now begin to absorb these old material wealth systems. So the stronger force is going to be informational, digital networks rather than material power. So back in the 19th century, we saw technology being used to strengthen states and capital. And in this cycle, with technology being the stronger force this time, we can expect to see technology deeply changing how we traditionally think of material ownership, wealth, and control. So back when Pluto was in Taurus, it deeply changed our material world. And this time with Pluto in Aquarius, it will deeply transform our society. So the power is shifting to Aquarius themes of network, AI, automation, decentralization, the collective, technology, and new social paradigms. And this time, what is resisting this or challenging this are the old material systems like property, banking, labor, physical ownership, national borders, food, energy, and resources, and how we traditionally think of economic security. So these are Taurus themes attempting to challenge the Aquarius power. And because Pluto is the one in Aquarius, it will ultimately absorb, dissolve, or transform these Taurus challenges. So this cycle is a series of squares between these two energies. And this can manifest as things like labor strikes, supply chain conflicts, war over resources like land, food, energy, minerals, etc. There can be a huge resistance to automation and AI, and an over-attachment to our old economy as it is deeply changing. And Taurus does not like change, so it will attempt to dig its heels in. So anything that we physically own, our traditional careers, money and the banking system, and even physical retail, can become quite challenged as Aquarius wants to go digital, decentralize, and completely transform our physical ownership experience. So in the previous cycle, we had machines strengthening the old world. And in this cycle, we have intelligent systems replacing the old world and transforming material society. So everything that was built on industrial technology that strengthened capitalism and empires will be transformed as AI and networks are destabilizing our economy, the market, government, media, education, and the entire concept of human productivity itself. So both signs are also fixed, so we can expect a digging in here and being very rigid one way or the other, either with revolution and technology or with the physical and material wealth systems. So the question is, how do you work with the challenges and with our path of evolution? Now, I believe many of us can agree that our experience today is not the best that we can do as infinite creator beings, right? We have been unconscious and unaware for the majority of building our experience as we know it today. And This has resulted in all kinds of suffering, imbalance, um, damaging beliefs, like the belief that, oh, you need to work a job you don't love for the majority of your life just to survive and pay your rent. The belief that that is in fact a fair and normal experience, which it isn't. The belief that there is not enough for everyone and we must compete with each other for limited resources. These are false beliefs and quite damaging, in fact, to ourselves and others. We have polluted the earth and our bodies and denied ourselves joy in the name of survival and given our soul's power away to higher authority. There is no higher authority for any soul. We are each our own highest authority, and nothing can take that from us unless we give it permission to. We are creators. With every thought, word, and action, you are constantly creating. You are never and will never stop creating. So the question is, what do you want to create? Do you want to create more of this insanity and suffering? Or do we want to create more joy and abundance? You get to choose your beliefs and thoughts, and they will determine what you create. And if we choose to think and believe that this experience is the best we can do, that we need to slave away to a higher authority in order to survive, that there is not enough in the world for every soul to thrive, then we will keep creating that because it's what we have created so far based on those beliefs and those thoughts. But if we choose to believe in our own soul's power, in our divinity, in God's given power to create as we speak it, we can allow ourselves to experience a much different world that reflects this truth, this higher truth. So the reality is, we need to make changes in order for things to change. So clinging to the old ways while we are simultaneously unhappy with the results of them is quite insane. There needs to be a different creation to have a different experience. So what can that experience look like where the human soul is not permanently linked to economic value? Where every soul has equal value, which is immeasurable. It's not something where we can say, oh, one soul is worth $15 an hour and the other is worth $300 an hour. No, all souls are equal and immeasurable in value. You cannot put a price on freedom or on your divinity. So over the next 15 years or so, as this Pluto-Mars square cycle plays out, we will see this tension playing out with Pluto and Aquarius receiving those multiple squares from Mars and Taurus, and that will drive our evolutionary journey. Now, how we choose to work with that is up to us individually. Each soul can choose whatever experience it desires, and those desires will change the more conscious we become. Now, this week's Yin Yoga practice is on this Pluto-Mars square. So if you would like to explore this hard aspect more intimately, please feel free to check that out at enchantedistrology.ca. And I wish you all a beautiful week ahead. Thank you so much for joining, and I will be back next week with another episode.